Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Talking About the Big Stuff podcast with Michael Cole. I am here today with my friend Kim DeLuca. Say hi, Kim.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we're going to be talking about tradition. That's our topic. And the reason I asked Kim on, well, there's two reasons really to ask Kim for this particular topic. The first reason being, I think that you and I are typically we kind of grew up somewhat traditional, and I think we valued tradition for a while into our adulthood. And I think that in the last 10 years or so, we've both kind of shed a lot of that. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the second reason is that one of the traditions that I think that one of the traditions I've practiced pretty strongly the last almost 15 years has been our tradition of going to the Best Picture Showcase. So I thought it fit both ways for us to have this discussion.
It does.
So, as far as tradition, another thing that I find that I think we should maybe start off with is I'm a parent, and you're about to be a parent in what, 2 weeks?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so tradition is something that I think we both got from our parents, and as people who aren't that traditional anymore, how are we, dealing with that going forward into parenting? Do you know what you're planning on with the baby?
Yes, so I think there's some traditions that I'm going to keep, especially around like holidays and things like that that I like. There's also some traditions that I'm going to break, that I think is something um, that a lot of people in my family wouldn't think of doing. And I think one of the biggest traditions I would say as a Roman Catholic is that I won't be baptizing my child. So that's one of the things. If they grow up, they decide to be religious, they decide they want to go that route, then I will support them in anything they want to do. But when it comes to me doing that for them, that's something that I'm not going, that's not a tradition I'm going to keep. I'm not going to keep that tradition. I'm not going to keep the tradition in my family of going to church every week and being very religious. I think that's one of the major breaks that I'm going to to do when
Yeah,
it comes to my child.
that's actually that's awesome. Like jumping off point because I hadn't thought of that specifically, but I we didn't baptize Logan when he was born. So my niece is 3 months younger than Logan, and when he was born, people were asking about when she would be baptized, and I don't remember anybody asking if or when Logan would be baptized. And I do remember having conversations with Sarah about it, saying like, is it just easier to get him baptized so that we don't have to hear about it? And then eventually, because Sarah's not Catholic, she was kind of like, well, you don't believe in that specifically. At that point, I wasn't an atheist, but she said, you don't believe in that specifically, so why would we do that just to appease people? That that's not really the way that you do anything else, and so we decided not to. But we're also in the same boat of if he becomes religious, which as of right now, and he's only 6, he he's pretty proud to tell me how he he knows Jesus is the son of God. So he is religious to whatever extent you can be at 6 years old.
Yeah.
But that's yeah, I didn't even think to ask you about baptizing, but that's a good way of approaching it, I think. Especially, I mean, is Neil was Neil raised Catholic?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
He was raised Catholic, and I think one of the big things that we might get a push of people like asking us to do it, or if we're going to do it, is because his grandfather is a deacon.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, some Neil had said to me, "Well, we could do it just for my grandfather because that's like he would love to be there and do it, and I'm like, I just couldn't do that just for the sake of a person
Yeah.
versus my beliefs.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you get those types of things. And my sister has two kids, and she hasn't baptized either of them. Um, what I've been told is because she can't come up with godparents, and then COVID happened, and so people weren't really going in
Right.
to churches and gathering and things like that. So that's when she had her children. There's not really those types of reasonings behind it anymore, that you can utilize. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody in my family actually says anything to me, or if we just go along our merry way and
Yeah.
no one no one even mentions it.
To be fair, though, getting baptized in COVID would have been the coolest because they had to do it by squirt gun. So then you get the pictures, you show the pictures to your kid when they're older, and you say, "This is how you were baptized." But on my in my family, so my side's Catholic, and I don't think we've had anybody actually say anything to us because I think that they just don't want to. They just I think know that I'm not. I never felt Catholic since Logan's been born, at least. And on Sarah's side, nobody's Catholic. And obviously, now that I'm living down in the South, most people aren't Catholic. And baptism at such a young age is a much more Catholic thing than I think it is outside in other versions of Christianity. I know that they do. Uh, I guess we do christenings and they do baptisms. I don't remember the difference. So like
Yeah.
I've seen babies, you know, what do they call it? Dedication or whatever ceremony for babies, but it's not the same process. Like baptized in a lot of other Christianity is more closer to like confirmation for Catholics.
Yeah.
So like nobody that I've talked to has, outside of my own family would have thought that it was weird because they're not Catholic. So, that's been kind of nice. Um, as far as you said you're not going to be going to church at all. So, or you're not going to be taking them to church at all when they're a little kid. We have not taken Logan to church, but I mean, part of it is that I don't like going to church. Like, even if it's not even, it's ultimately when if he ever asks to go, I'll take him.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm just like, I was bored as a kid. Even when I believed all of it, I was bored. I definitely don't want to go now. And I like having Sundays. I like the fact that one of the nice things about not doing a lot of these specific traditions is that you get free time when everybody else is doing the stuff. Like, if I could get away with not celebrating Christmas, I absolutely would. Like, not because I don't like Christmas, but just like, why does it have to be that day? And as it is, we're going away for New Year's this year, and I was really pushing to get it for Christmas because Logan will be out of school, and keep getting fought on that tradition, and I'm like, well, I mean, why are we, all the things that we kind of grew up with traditionally as Christmas have kind of when you get married, you have to pick a side, and you have to pick a way
Yeah.
of doing it, or you alternate. And, so it becomes like fairly non-traditional in that way. But, it's like when my mom used to say, it just doesn't feel like Christmas without snow. And I always thought that was never, like, the snow thing's new. But it to me, it always, Christmas is the traditional, it's the time of year where I think of tradition most. And it's the
Yeah.
thing that I would so enjoy doing anything else, other
Yeah.
than the tradition.
I'm with you on that. Like, that's a big traditional thing for my family as well. And to be honest, like, because I have two sisters, one of them's married with two children, and one of them's not married. And it comes to the fact that now that I'm having a child, we're really going to be doing like every other year, where on Christmas, one family gets it's either the in-laws or it's my family, my parents.
Yeah.
And so it's a big adjustment, not necessarily for me and my siblings. I think we're fine with it. It's more of a big adjustment for my mother.
Yeah.
She's the one who just is not able to deal with the fact that, she's not going to see her kids when she wants to, which in her brain is December 25th.
Yeah. In my family, we didn't have that big of an issue with the adjusting when I got married because my mom's generation had that problem. So when I was, when I was born, I was the only grandkid on my mom's side, and then Sam was the second, and then I was 9 years old before we had another kid, and so we had Christmas on Christmas Eve with my entire mom's side of the family every year, and then when my aunts and uncles started getting married and having kids, then it started getting split. And so that was, I was 10, 11 years old. And then that's been going on now for the last 25 years plus. So we didn't have to face that same issue.
Yeah, but it's interesting because on my mom's side of the family, and she's the one who's like the believer of like it has to be on Christmas. Like if my kids aren't here on Christmas, like it doesn't feel the same. However, with her siblings, they stopped doing Christmas on Christmas a long time ago. It was we pick a weekend around Christmas and we would all get together. And before my grandparents died, it would be at their house, and then when they passed away, it would be at somebody else's house. And sometimes we still see each other around Christmas. Sometimes it's around Thanksgiving, or it's at a different point. So it's just interesting to me how some people can just grab a hold of a certain tradition. It
Yeah.
has to be this way when in her own family it wasn't. So it's going to be definitely a difficult year when when she learns that this is not her year to have the baby.
Right. Right.
We'll be down here because Neil's mother, it's her first time being a grandparent on Christmas. So we
Yeah.
decided that would be the easiest way to start. And so this is an in-law year, and then next year will be a be my family year, and
Yep.
then we'll go back and forth, which isn't a huge issue. At least I don't think so, but I know for some, like my mom, it'll be an adjustment.
Yeah. Yeah. Your mother-in-law is lives fairly close to you, right?
Yeah, she's only about 40 minutes away.
Okay. So that, I mean, with a it'll be what? The baby will be 4 months, 3 months, something like that.
Yeah.
That a 40-minute drive is going to be significantly smoother than either a 7 hour drive or a hour and a half, 2 hour flight. So that just logistically, I feel like the first year that makes perfect sense, even without the first time grandparent stuff in there too. But and that's how
Yeah.
I always think about stuff, and it drives Sarah crazy a little bit when I'm thinking about the logistics of things because we're luckily she doesn't care if I do it to my family. Like so my parents, so my grandfather's Christmas party now is the typically the Saturday or Sunday before Christmas, and since Christmas this year is on a Saturday, it'll be the 19th or whatever. And so she doesn't care when I blow that off, but when I'm like, well, do we have to do Christmas like, in Massachusetts, now it's not as big a deal cuz her sister comes down, but it for a little while like every year I'm like, what if we do this instead? And it's just like, no, this is Christmas, this is what we do. So, I got a little bit of wiggle room on New Year's, I guess. So, um one thing I wanted, I've been wanting to talk about with the idea of tradition. So when you and I started doing the Best Picture showcase, and for everybody that's listening that doesn't know what that is, every year before the Oscars, AMC Theaters does a showcase of all the movies nominated for Best Picture. The first few years that we did it, it was 5 movies, so it was all in one day. In the last 10 years or so, it's been split over 2 days because it's 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 movies. But when we started doing that, that was the first, that was really, it's the only tradition that I think that's stuck, that I've created, that I've been started, as an adult. Everything else, was grandfathered in from probably before I was born. And one thing that drives me a little crazy about traditions is when people want to start a tradition. Like, because I think it drives me a little crazy. Maybe this is just the English major in me, but the idea that, like, it's not, you can't start a tradition. You start and then it becomes a tradition. And like when you and I started with the Best Picture Showcase, we never discussed it until like probably the second or third year. Like I think the second year was like, you want to do that again? Sure. And then by the third year, it was a tradition. And so when I hear
Yeah.
like first annual, every time I hear first annual, it drives me nuts. Anytime someone goes, "Oh, we're starting a tradition where we do this," it's like, hey, we're trying a thing. We're trying a thing, and if it sticks, it will be a tradition. You know, I maybe that's just a weird thing about me, but I find it a little. I don't want to say insulting. I just want to say like it drives me up a wall.
No, I completely understand it. It's one of those things where it's like you can't just like force it upon somebody. You can try, but I find a lot of times those when you are like, we're starting a tradition, we're having Friendsgiving, say,
Hmm.
it never sticks. It's like it's a forced thing where you're finally like, okay, I guess we have to do it again because this was the first and
Yeah.
I guess it worked out or it didn't work out and now what are we supposed to do? No, but I'm totally with you on that. I think it has to be more organic to actually start
Yeah.
a
Absolutely.
tradition.
Yeah. And I think that between that and just my resistance to being told, the traditions all a lot of times feel like someone's way of convincing you to do something you don't want to do. And so that is like the first half of that, where it's like, oh, if we start this thing, then I can get you to do it all the time. So like my sister and my mother, who I don't think listen to this podcast, but if they ever do, I'm saying this with love, but they started a tradition at some point when Sarah and I first started dating where we would go apple picking every year. And I hate apple picking, but every year we would go, and the tradition, actually the real tradition that formed, was them talking about it with Sarah, scheduling it with Sarah, and then me being told about it after it was already scheduled. So that's the real tradition. But since I moved down here, the tradition's kind of died. That wasn't why I moved down. At least that's what I'll tell them. But then the same thing when I was when Sarah and I were planning the wedding, and when we were either when she was pregnant or when we were talking about trying something, the wedding. Well, this is the tradition. You have to do this. The baby. Well, you have to do this because that's the way you do things. And it drove me. It's driven me crazy the whole way through because it's always seems like it's something that I wouldn't want to do, whether you call it a tradition or not. But the tradition seems like a sneaky way to try to like force you to do stuff that you don't want to do.
Yeah. And it's interesting how like when you have a kid or you're having a kid and people are certain people either in your family or in your life are like, oh, are you going to keep this what you do for this or for that? Like again, it always seems to go back to Christmas for me because I feel like that is like the biggest tradition in my family.
Hmm.
um and doing things is, well, what are you going to do? Is it going to be like the same thing that you've been doing for X amount of years? Like I know for my husband Neil, even if we come in the middle of the day for Christmas, where it's an off day for Christmas, if it's an off year, we
Hmm.
go to his mother's house. She forces him and his grown brother to walk down the stairs towards the Christmas tree to get the same pictures she did with them as a kid.
Yeah. That.
Where it's that's tradition and that has to happen because if we don't have this picture, then I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you going to do the same with your kid? I have no idea. It's going to be whatever organically grows around that type of thing.
Yeah, that's true. I with Logan, there was a lot less of the tradition, and I guess more of the like, it's the same mentality even though it's not a tradition, where it was like, well, you'll see once you have a kid, this is going to change, and once you have a kid, that's going to change. And a lot of it was like me swearing and stuff, and I am happy to say that I have not changed. If anything, I've leaned into it. And, and it's hilarious because I used to like, if I accidentally swore in front of somebody else's kid, they would tell me like, "Oh, you gotta get used to not saying that because you're not gonna want to say that when you have a kid." And don't worry, you don't think so, but it will be different when you have a kid. And I'm 6 years in, and it has not slowed down at all. And I love it when I do it in front of him, in front of friends or whoever has given me crap in the past. And it's just like there's this silent thing of us all acknowledging that I was right, which is my favorite thing in the world. Like when anytime Sarah has to say that I was right, I literally tell her it's my favorite words in the English language. I'm surprised Logan hasn't picked up on it yet, but I love being right so much. That's my tradition, is I love being right. But I don't know. They like a lot of the traditions just come down to like, and I guess this is less so traditions that anybody we know started and more just societal traditions. But like the wedding is the thing that drove me the most crazy, because every time we would come up against something, someone would be like, "Oh, it's a tradition that anybody who has asked Sarah to be in her wedding, they have to be in your wedding as a bridesmaid." And I was just like, "But what if she's been in like 50 weddings?" And they were like, "That's the plot of 27 dresses." And I'm like, "Well, that doesn't make me want to do it." Like I'm indifferent to that point. Like, and ultimately, anytime the wedding tradition stuff came up, I would just, this was my like thing that would end the conversation every time was, "Well, her dad's not giving me land or cattle, so I don't really have that same skin in the game as far as the traditions." Did you have those issues when you were getting married? What?
Um, Not the second time around.
Yeah.
The second time around, well, it's Neil's first and my second time. We just did what we wanted to. We planned our wedding. We paid for it mostly ourselves. Got a little assistance from my parents. But the first time around, it was more of a traditional affair. And it was, well, it needs to be in a church and it needs to be like this, and you need
Yeah.
to include this, and you need to include that. And at the time, I was much more religious than I am today. So the church piece didn't bother me, and that type of thing didn't bother me. But it was just mostly like, well, you need to incorporate certain things. And because that was being paid for mostly by others, you kind of felt like you needed to bow down to those pressures
Yeah.
because it wasn't you who could call the shots. This one was, I'm calling the shots. I want what I want. I don't need a a priest. I don't need someone of the clergy. You officiated my wedding.
Yeah.
So
It
it
was
was
it was awesome, by the way, doing that, because now I have been every part of a wedding except for a bride. I've been a bridesmaid. I've been a groomsman. A What do they call it when you're best man? I've been obviously been a groom, and after your wedding, I was a officiant. So I just need to be a bride the next time around, and then I'll have my checklist complete.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I like it's still to this day, I will tell people that for your wedding, I wasn't in it because I was a female, but I was like, I would still look good in that suit, man.
Yeah.
Uh, you could have
It
put me in that long line of groomsmen,
yeah.
and I would have cleaned up nicely in that suit.
That was actually one of the few things like I if I could go back in time, you would have been one of my groomsmen. That was me being more traditional than I am now, and just being like, oh, I'm just gonna have guys, and like not thinking really about it. And I had not been in Sam's wedding on as her man of honor, and stuff, so I just hadn't really thought outside the box on that one. And if I could go back in time, because I don't speak to one of my groomsmen, and I barely talk to two other groomsmen. I'm trying to, and I can't remember the whole list in my head, but I would definitely pick you if I could go back in time.
Yeah, but that's where like you think of those traditional things, and you think of
Yeah.
tradition however many years ago versus tradition now, and how would you do it the same or different, or were there the little outside pressures of, well, you're going to look back at those pictures and be like, why did I, have that girl standing there in
Yeah.
in a suit, like that's weird, or like, or in a dress on my side, and why would I have like it did, you know the whole idea of it has to be symmetrical.
Yeah.
So if I'm having three people in my wedding party, then he needs to have three people in his wedding party,
Hmm.
because it's going to look odd, because it's not going to be balanced.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's something that we did face the day of the wedding. I don't know how much you remember of this because it wouldn't have affected you, but the day of my wedding, one of the bridesmaids. So we the night before the wedding, the groomsmen asked Sarah about wearing sunglasses because we were outside and we were going to be facing the sun, and Sarah was totally fine with it. Then we're literally in line to go out to process out or whatever, and one of the two or three of the bridesmaids come over and they're like, Sarah doesn't want the groomsmen wearing the sunglasses. And I was like, she said it was fine. And they were like, well, she's saying that now. And they were like being manipulative. They were lying. And like, I knew it in the moment, but I couldn't go to check with her because, again, another tradition, you don't see the bride before the wedding or whatever. So I didn't go. And I just said, sorry, guys, but I can't really fight this. We're literally like, they're playing the music already for us to go outside when this comes up. It was like a sneak attack. And one of my favorite things about the photos from the wedding is that the second we got out onto the not the altar because it was outside, but like the area where we all stand, um, Wes pops on his sunglasses, and he had the weirdest sunglasses of everybody's. Like he
Of
had
course.
like round like perfectly round lenses, and it looks great, but it also is like a big fuck you to like the idea that like it's not going to look right in the photos, and it looks great to me, and I it makes me smile every time I look at the photos and see him with his sunglasses on, because they were trying to control a tradition in the one like moment that I couldn't fight it, and so Wes fought it for me, and it was awesome to have this like
Yeah.
this thing that will be there when I'm 80 in the books to kind of be like, yep, we didn't completely lose that fight.
There's a big push to do a first look and see each other prior to like walking down the aisle. And it's interesting because I asked Neil what he wanted, because it's his first time, so I wanted him to have what he wanted. So I asked him, and he said, "No, I want to see you first when you're walking down the aisle." And I said, "Great." And so we were saying that to our photographer, and he was trying to really push this first look on us, and I
Yeah.
was like, "But why? Like we said we wanted it this way. Like well, it's better in this way, and it's X, Y, and Z." I'm like, "No, but this is what we want."
Yeah.
Like, why are you trying to push this on us?
I was, and that's weird because it's almost the anti tradition. now too, which is a little bit bizarre. But I was opposed to the idea of the first look for a long time, and now I'm like, well, I don't care. Like what ultimately, I'm glad that I didn't. I liked the way it played out at my wedding, seeing Sarah that way, um, but I was, I thought it was weird that other people were doing it. Now I've kind of like, I don't, what does it bother me that other people are doing it differently? But I was a little more
Yeah.
superstitious back then, and
It doesn't matter to me at all.
yeah,
But when even your photographer is trying to push like
yeah, that's obnoxious. I would be mad.
something on you, he was fine with it after. We were like, no, we're 100%, this is what. However, it was a big thing where it was like, and that was a big thing that people asked was,
Yeah,
are you doing a first look? No.
yeah,
Oh, but why not? Like, it's great. It's just an intimate moment between the two of you. And I said, well, it's not what we want.
yeah, yeah. The wedding traditions, they're like there's so many of them, and there's some that are just random. Like I don't know what the idea. I guess the idea of the first look is, or the not seeing the bride before is probably back to like arranged marriages or something, which also makes it
Yeah.
its own weird little thing. But when we were getting married, my cousin sang in the wedding, and it was really nice. But when we were getting ready for it, one of my cousins texted me and was like, "Do you have the number for the organist so that we can prepare with them?" And I was like, "We're not gonna have an organist." And she was like, "What do you mean? Doesn't the church have an organist?" And I was like, "We're not getting married in a church." And this is like 3 weeks before the wedding. And she texts me back and goes, "Does your mother know you're not getting married in a church?" And I was like, well, I'm not marrying my mom. That's literally what I said back to her. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand how, like, yes, my mother's aware. At this point, she'd been to the venue. But it was so funny to me, the idea of, like, you're not getting married in a church. Oh my God. And it's like, I don't know. Like, first of all, no offense to church weddings, but they're long. They're longer and they're boring. Um, Now, I think your second wedding was much more entertaining for me.
Yeah.
It had a better. It was shorter, I the main speaker was really cool, and and then that was me. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like Sam's wedding. Did you went to Sam's wedding, right?
Yep. So I did.
I love my sister and my brother-in-law, but if I never have to do another church wedding ever again, I'll be so happy. There was so much of it that was boring, and then there was like afterwards, people were like, "Oh, you like adjusted her, the train of her dress. That was so cute." And I'm like, I think it was probably anything to just like not look fidgety in front of everybody because I was like, I'm like kneeling here on the altar with the three of them because it was I'm trying to figure I can't remember who Matt's best man was, but it was me and the two of them and whoever the best man was, and I was just like, this is in some ways literal torture to me. The idea of being in front of everybody in a church. I don't know. My dad used to
Yeah.
because my dad used to when I was a kid. He wouldn't go to church because he doesn't believe, and he would always tell us that God would strike him down with lightning if he ever went into one. That's why he wouldn't go. And in those moments when you're in like kneeling in front of a bunch of people and you don't want to be there, and it wasn't that I wanted to be there for my sister. I wanted to be at the wedding. I did not want to sit there for like an hour or whatever it was.
Yeah. And with those types of weddings and those in church weddings and traditionally like that, you never know really what the the priest is going to say during the homily.
Yeah,
Uh, Whereas, like, you have your own officiant, you can pretty much be like, okay, we can vet it out. But what it brings me back to is uh, tradition versus non-tradition wedding that I went to. one of each in the same span of a weekend. So I went to my cousin's church wedding where her priest went through this homily about pretty much now all she's good for is popping out babies and being a mom.
Gross.
Like that was it. And just sitting there, like sitting there going, I'm so uncomfortable. This man has got to stop talking. Like this is awful. And on also picking the traditional reading of love is patient, love is kind, love is whatever. I can't remember the rest of it. I
Yeah.
just dislike that reading greatly because everybody uses it and then they use it to spin marriage into some sort of tool, which is the traditional piece. Well, so we went to her wedding, and then it was either the same weekend or the next weekend we went to one of Neil's good friends' wedding, which was not in a church. It was out in like a park, and everybody brought coolers of beer and things like that, and they had this untraditional ceremony. And the interesting part was they picked somebody to read that love is patient, love is kind reading, but when he was speaking about it, he spoke about it in such a way that I've never heard anybody like spin that reading, where I was like, wow, I don't mind that reading too much. Usually I hear that reading and my skin crawls because that's just what everybody reads at a wedding.
Yeah.
And then, so it's just the exact opposite experiences of this church traditional wedding where I was crawling out of my skin because of being told that her only purpose in life is to have babies and to be a mother, and going to this other wedding where they use the exact same reading, but it wasn't used in that traditional sense. It was used in a non-traditional sense about just love and caring for everybody, where I was like, wow, this is a new light. This is something where I'm like not crawling out of my skin. This is great.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as picking, you said you don't know what the priest is going to say, but you can vet the officiant. Uh, did you have that thought before you picked me? Because when you said that, I thought, well, I literally couldn't think of a person worse to go with that than myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, as far as like, I mean, I think I did pretty well, but like, given my track record, you took a real big gamble, I think.
Well, I think one of the reasons why I picked you was not necessarily for like the vetting of what you would say. It's more so because I know you know me.
Yeah.
We've known each other since 1999. Uh,
Yeah.
whether we were good friends back in 1999 or not, not necessarily. We grew into better friends throughout high school. But I knew you knew me and you've seen me in really up situations, really down situations. So I knew that even if you said something that would be mildly inappropriate that I wouldn't care about, everybody knows that you at least you know me and you're saying something because it's out of a place of goodness versus somebody else just saying something because this is like their belief system.
True. Yeah, I wasn't. It would have been jokes at the worst case scenario. Wouldn't have been like I wouldn't have been like, okay, you are now Neil's property, but you made it difficult for me just based on the date that you picked for your wedding. And Sarah was when first of all, we got the save the date for your wedding before I knew that I was going to be the officiant. And when I got the save the date, I was like, Sarah, Kim's getting married on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And Sarah was like, whatever you're thinking, don't say it. Don't say it to me. Don't say it to anybody. Because if you say it, you're going to want to repeat it. And I was like, I can't not say it. I can't. I'm going to get it out of my system. And so I had, a ton of jokes about it. And then you asked me to be the officiant, and Sarah was like, "Okay, here's the deal. You are not allowed to make eye contact with Pat the entire wedding because you're going to lose it." Sarah like basically reined me in about 95% of the way. And I was never going to do anything, but I was a little nervous that like something would pop into my head and I would just like smirk or like laugh because of just the 9/11ness of it. And then the thing that got me the last 5% was at your rehearsal dinner, your mom said, I know you like to joke, but this is a serious thing. So please take it seriously. And your mom scared the shit out of me. And I was like,
she does
perfect.
that.
No, she's never scared me before that. I've always thought of her as like really sweet and nice. And then in that moment, though, I was like, I do not want to mess up because I could see her being very mad, and I do not want that.
Oh, yeah.
So she got me the last 5% of the way there. And that's the way weddings should be, where one person is going to be a train wreck, and then his wife and the bride's mother go, pull it together, dumbass. That should be a tradition.
Yes.
But I can say that at the reception, went up to your mother, or I was talking to your mother and Pat at one point, and your mom said you did a really good job, and it was at that point it was at least 2 hours after the wedding was done, and I was like, oh, okay, because I didn't like at that point I didn't care what anybody. I mean, obviously I knew you and Neil were happy with the job that I had done, but I was nervous about your mom. And I don't think I had made any inappropriate jokes at the rehearsal. I just think she knows that I am trying to be funny. So I don't think she knew that I was like, it's 9/11. Like, why? Why is it 9/11 today? But yeah, I did make one joke though. That not a 9/11 joke, but do you remember what Pat was wearing at your wedding?
Yes.
When everybody was coming in and getting seated, Neil was already out. And I looked at Neil and his brother, and I looked over at Pat, who was sitting next to Sarah, halfway. You know, they were like dead center. That was the other thing. Sarah tells me not to look at Pat, and then her and Pat sit in the dead center of the auditorium. And I looked at Neil and I said, I didn't realize Pat was a drug dealer's accountant. Because he was wearing like what you would picture Scarface's accountant to wear.
Yep.
Like it was so funny to me. Don't worry, Pat has not listened to a single episode of the podcast, even though he was on one. He told me that when I saw him 2 weeks ago, so we won't have to worry about him hearing that, even though I'm sure he knows that I thought he looked like a drug dealer. Drug dealer's accountant. He didn't look cool enough to be a drug dealer, but I think that's all the points I wanted to make about tradition, unless you've got anything else that you want to talk about.
No, I don't. Tradition is just it's interesting to me because like when you said let's talk about tradition, the one thing that popped into my head was that song from Fiddler on the Roof. Tradition.
I don't know the song. I know If I Were a Rich Man. That's the only song I know.
Yeah, well, there's a whole song about tradition, and it's literally they just go tradition throughout it, and that's like the first thing that popped in my head, and I was like, that's a weird thing to pop in your head when you're thinking about tradition.
That is weird.
But it's funny because that's the first thing that popped into Neil's head, so I guess we're made for each other.
Yeah, nice. So, have you listened to any episodes of the podcast yet?
I have not. No, I was going to, and then pregnancy brain hit, and nothing ever gets done.
That's okay. But there's been a question I've been asking every guest at the end of the episode, and I would have prepped you if I had known that you hadn't listened. So, but I'm just going to spring it on you, and that is
works for me.
What joke or impression or thing making fun of you in your life have you found the most amusing?
Something making fun of me personally that
yes.
I find most amusing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to take myself probably too seriously. And so it's hard for me to like fully laugh at myself. But usually I laugh mostly at I'll just say ridiculous things, especially with Neil. And then he just mocks me for it. So that's usually what I find the most amusing is when he like mocks me or he just makes faces at me. And I'm like, what? He just looks at me and goes, you're ridiculous. And then we move on. But it's usually just me just saying something or dancing around or doing something like that. That's usually where I laugh at myself the most. I would say probably like lately, like the one big thing was we went to a friend's wedding and it was in July, so I'm 9 months pregnant now, so it was like 7 months pregnant, 7.5 months pregnant at the time.
Yep.
And one of the things I do at weddings is I twerk, and I just it's just the way I dance. But I was twerking and everybody was laughing at me because I have this belly that's just like bouncing up and down while I'm dancing ridiculously on the dance floor with not a drop of alcohol in sight. And so my brother-in-law took a video, and that's just a hilarious video as well. So I also don't laugh at myself for that, where it's like, well, I'm just having fun. I'm enjoying myself. I don't care what I look like.
Yeah. No, that's
Mock me all
awesome.
you want.
Yeah, that is a good one. I happen to twerk quite a bit too, but I don't do it. I do it with like around my family. I'll do it, but I won't. That's not something I do a ton. If I'm a little, so I was a little drunk at a work function like a year ago, and I dropped it low and picked it up slow. And to this day, anytime at work we're going to like go to go to something with drinks afterwards, it's like, okay, Michael, you ready to drop it low and pick it up slow? And they all, everybody thinks that I did that. I was able to do that because I was drunk, and I'm like, no, I just have to squat a lot. When you have a little kid, you're tying shoes and stuff. You're in that position. All right, so I guess if you've got nothing else to add about tradition, I don't
Oh,
really. We've got the question answered. Um, I know that you're not doing a podcast or anything, so you probably don't have anything to promote. But if there's anything else that you'd want to say to the audience, now's your chance.
no, I don't have anything else to say. I don't do podcasts, and just waiting on baby to come. So that's my life right now.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on,
Uh,
and to my listeners, please subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and give us a good review on iTunes or wherever you're getting this podcast. Um, and we will talk to you next week.